For more than 50 years, we've watched TV. You've watched speechlessly, in awe, as moments unfold on television. Women making news, women writing scripts, women delivering performances, deserving of more airtime and our adulation. This podcast weaves the rich past that TV women have left us with analysis to create context for today. Oprah says, step out of the history that is holding you back. Step into the new story you are willing to create. Just by listening to this podcast, you're more likely to actively support women in TV today. And isn't that the kind of story we want to create? What are we waiting for? Hey friends, let's go back to school via the powers of TV. Pretty much every kid growing up in America longed to have a teacher as cool as some of the ones we'll be talking about today. TV has always considered teaching to be a respectable woman's profession, though a trend you'll notice is that the teachers we discuss are largely single women. And there was a time, 50 years ago, when a married teacher was discouraged from teaching much beyond her wedding day. It sort of made getting that teacher's license a little bit of a truncated career choice. But teachers today have it just as hard. And yet, some of those storylines that we even see today are indeed timeless. There's a veritable swarm of teachers who have graced the tiny screen over the decades, and it would be positively tedious to run clips and profile each one. And here's why. Just like in your own school experience, some teachers were really profound. They inspired you. You remember them. You'd actually look them up when you got back to your hometown. Or maybe you've even friended them on Facebook. And then there are teachers who were like background noise. With 50-plus years of herstory, TV shows featuring women teachers as main characters or regular supporting characters, we've got quite a highlight reel for you today. We're paying extra attention to extraordinary performances, positive messaging, and quirky style, because that's how you always get an A. There's so much to cover that, in this case, our Salute to Teachers will cover 2 segments. We'll review college and high school teachers and administrators in this segment, and then down the road, elementary school teachers. And there's about a little less than a dozen of them, and they will be featured in another podcast segment. So let's start off with higher education, shall we? There haven't been too many shows that took place in a college or technical school, let alone a law school, which is where we are introduced to the very cool, smart, and confident professor and defense attorney Annalise Keating, played by Viola Davis. The show, How to Get Away with
Professor
Murder.
Dozier, is the heat on really high in here?
No, that's just your nerves.
Oh. Dean Sumner said you weren't coming in, considering...
Sumner was mistaken. I'll take it from here. I've opted to depart from the syllabus today. Ms. Chapin, can you tell us what the Fifth Amendment is?
The Fifth Amendment? Right. It assures your right to protection from self-incrimination.
Are you asking me?
No, that's my answer.
And it's a correct one. When clients talk to the police, they think clarifying or being helpful can aid in their case. They're wrong. Whatever you say to the police can and will be misconstrued to support the prosecution. So when in doubt, shut your mouth.
Davis has twice been nominated for Oscars for her work in film. She's won a host of other awards, including an Emmy for lead actress in this drama of How to Get Away with Murder, which premiered in 2014 and begins its 3rd season soon. Give it a try if you aren't already a faithful fan. Now, due to the fact that there are really few memorable shows that take place in the higher education setting and feature a woman character, it's just amazing to realize that this is the case, and it certainly begs the question, why? Why can't we envision women in control of a small or large lecture hall? Or here's another question, have I missed one? It wasn't on purpose, so please let me know. There are, however, a plethora of women high school teachers who have graced the small screen over the years, It's a list worth savoring, some mighty talented actresses who appeared in dramas and comedies. And yes, we looked at characters who were administrators too, not necessarily teachers. We can all appreciate the drama-filled years of high school. Pack a few hundred kids into a building, toss in hormones, immaturity, and all sorts of pressures, and good writers and producers can create a great show. We're reminded, too, that this phase of life may appear different from generation to generation. Hair, clothes, speech, even what the schools look like. But underneath all of that, there are life lessons and growing pains that are pretty much the same. So take high school counselor Liz McIntyre, played by Denise Nicholas, who was on room 222 during its run from 1969 to 1974. Now, while this might seem like ancient herstory to you, let me underscore that this show was huge. While technically it was just a 30-minute sitcom, it broached all sorts of coming-of-age plots experienced by the older half of the baby boom. These were years where most houses only had one TV in them, and it only got maybe 3 or 4 channels. Cable TV's draw on the major networks was still a few years off. Now, Room 222, created by James L. Brooks, who went on to create The Mary Tyler Moore Show, brought a diverse cast to prime time and offered up frank discussions about topics like teen marriage, drugs, cheating, money, pushing the boundaries of the establishment. You know, these are values, these are themes of behavior, of socialization that was all a part of the educational process as it was viewed by families in the late 60s. Denise Nicholas and her co-star Lloyd Haynes, both African Americans, received top billing. Denise's character Liz was an educated woman who was well respected by her peers and the very diverse group of students with whom she interacted. Because the character of Liz McIntyre is sort of integral to every episode, or many of the episodes, I'll just grab this clip from the first season in which she tries to gently help a female student, a white female student, come to her senses about why getting married while still in school when you don't have to is a bad idea. Now, the converse of this is that Pete Haynes, the teacher counterpart, he's also trying to do this with the young man who wants to marry this student. So in this clip, Liz pushes the limits of possibly aiding the young woman's decision by hosting her bridal shower at her apartment and helping her see more of the meaning of the gifts the young lady received.
Aren't they all beautiful? What do you see there, Abby? A lot of love. Love and little girl things. Not wife things and not mother things. Little girl things. They're just presents. They suit you. Those girls are your friends. And even though they didn't know it, they were telling you exactly what I should have told you when you first said you were going to marry Charlie. It's too soon, Abby.
I didn't think you were going to lecture me.
No lecture. Just the truth. You're not pregnant now, but what about a month from now? The thing you hate most about home are the restrictions. You ever think about the restrictions you'd have with a baby?
Oh, well, Charlie can help.
What do you think Charlie is? He's supposed to help you, hold down a job, and go to school? Don't you think that's asking an awful lot?
Oh, then I'll take the pill.
There's more ahead than just having a baby. You think Charlie will go on to City College and get his degree?
I know he will. I'll get a job, too. He'll go to college.
And you'll have 2 years of high school.
You want us to wait?
I want you to think. To look ahead as far as you can, that's all.
This was must-see TV in the late 60s and early 70s, much like Friday Night Lights was from 2006 to 2011. Tammy Taylor, played by Connie Britton, was a counselor who sometimes got embroiled in the complicated social network of football players and the young women students who followed them or were on the cheerleader. It was kind of a sexist environment there, and not the least of which were the incredible alpha parents who were all very much a part of this football-oriented conservative community. Now, here's how Connie Britton described the show's foray into an abortion plot. find this on YouTube at the Archive of American Television, one of my favorite places online in the whole wide world.
Said that they were going to do this abortion storyline, and I was against it. I just felt very concerned that we were not going to be able to do it justice, and I actually did a lot of research, calling people specifically in Austin to find out exactly what would happen and what would be the school counselor's responsibility in this particular instance, and because they were basically going to have Tammy really get in trouble for having advised this girl. It was a touchy one for sure. Friday Night Lights was where I learned one of the most important things of my life, I think, which is that sometimes, if you can just dive into the hardest stuff and just let it, and try to do it in a very raw and authentic way, it will always be satisfying in some way, even if it's not successful or whatever. That storyline was a really good example because I did end up feeling after we shot it that we had managed to tell the story in a way that felt really authentic. We weren't taking sides.
I may be showing my age here, but I remember watching The Waltons, and I also watched Friday Night Lights, and I find them both to be excellent family viewing if you've got teens or young people in the family. It's a good group experience, and it leaves a lot to talk about, and you can talk about it in enough of a third-person sort of way that nobody takes anything too personally. Just food for thought there. It's worth buying on DVD. It will age well, too, in part because the plots involve all those familiar universal growing pains of young adulthood. As counselors, Liz McIntyre and Tammy Taylor served as confidants and advisors. They had these close relationships with the students that otherwise you saw as part of the plot apart from the parents of the students. And just as Tammy Taylor helped young men and women through the politics of football, with all the pressures that come with that, we also can't forget a certain motivator who set the standard for women coaches. In this case, we're talking about the rough and tumble world of grooming world-class dancers just a few steps off Broadway.
You learn something once, and it's yours for life. But first, you have to become a dancer. Now, you may be hot stuff up in Harlem, or you may have the best tutu collection in the country. Doesn't matter. I don't have time for prima donnas. If you want to become a dancer, you're going to have to work. Work your little tights off.
I ain't wearing no tights.
You've got big dreams. You want fame. Well, fame costs. And right here is where you start paying in sweat. I want to see sweat. And the better you are, the more sweat I'm going to demand. So if you never had to fight for anything in your life, put your gloves on and get ready for round one.
Seriously, I listened to the incredibly talented, prolific actress, producer, director, and dancer Debbie Allen bark those words to her students at New York City High School for the Performing Arts, and I still feel like a total slacker all these years later. Allen's character, dance teacher Lydia Grant, was a carryover from the 1980 movie Fame to the TV show of the same name, which ran from 1982 to 1987. For more on Debbie Allen and her incredible career, tune in to an entire segment of this podcast dedicated just to her. Those are some very memorable characters who held key roles in ensemble shows. Apart from How to Get Away with Murder, a show that includes a teacher is likely to be a family show. Some years we have time to watch a family show, some years we don't. And maybe we're more drawn as preteens or teenagers to the colors and the plots or the performers in a family show as a young viewer. Now, this list is by no means exhaustive, but here are a few more high school teachers that you might remember. Also from room 222, student teacher turned permanent placement Alice Johnson was played by Karen Valentine at the incredibly large and diverse Walt Whitman High School. For it being 1969, whoever was doing the casting on that show had an incredible eye, well, first of all, for good-looking young people, but also to really demonstrate a sense of diversity and inclusion in the plots. So during these 5 years, This young perky teacher named Karen Valentine became a household name. She earned an Emmy in the show's first year. And there was just something about her. She was incredibly earnest. And it's amazing because she hasn't done a significant series or film since. But I'm guessing that during the early 1970s, when young men and women had the chance to decide what career they were going to go into, Karen Valentine and the teacher Alice Johnson inspired all sorts of young people to become teachers. She really was that perky. And if you don't believe me, catch an episode on YouTube or buy the DVDs of seasons 1 and or 2. Those are the only ones available.
Miss Johnson, take over the class.
I've just been in class a day, but I feel like I know many of you already. Now you're going to get a chance to know me.
Well, whoopee.
Civil War generals. Now, I don't know why I'm so interested in that, but you know how some things strike your interest, and before you know it, you're interested. Anyway, Civil War generals were the sort of men who, Jason, why are you still standing?
'Cause I'm tired of sitting.
I see. Jason, are you trying to frighten me?
Didn't know you were so scared.
Well, I am. This is the first time I've ever taught a class, and I'm darn scared. You're making things a lot harder for me. What's the point?
Go on, man. Sit down.
Now, about 8 years later, I hope you didn't blink and miss the tremendous show Square Pegs. It was a series created by a woman that ran just 20 episodes in 1982 and 1983, Ann Bates. And it's available online and on DVD. And honestly, this is a very colorful salute to the 80s. It should come packaged as the consummate 80s time capsule. And within it, this is a show set around two characters. There is a teacher, Ms. Loomis, played by Catelyn Adams, who influenced lead characters Patty Green, played by Sarah Jessica Parker, and Lauren Hutchinson, played by Amy Linker, in all of their day-to-day dramas and challenges that it's like when you are the square peg in an 80s-style high school. Also worth the price of admission if you watch these 20 precious episodes. It really is. I highly recommend it. Performances by Devo and the Waitresses. What's there to lose? Fast forward another 5 years and you get another show aimed at teens and preteens. From 1987 to 1989, Good Morning Miss Bliss was about a fictional high school in Indianapolis and starred acclaimed British actress Hayley Mills in the title role. Now, for those too young to remember, Hayley Mills was an icon of the 60s Disney empire, and she was the young lady who played two roles in the original Parent Trap. Disney Productions launched the show initially, though with some misguided belief that teens would find a middle-aged Hayley Mills as charming and provocative as teens of the early 60s found her as a teen. It was a stretch, to say the least.
It's Hoosier Harvest Week, a time for hayrides, bonfires, and practical jokes, and everyone's fair game. In my 11 years at JFK, no one's ever successfully pulled a prank on me. Maybe this year they'll stop trying.
You're taking quite a chance. Hey, it's worth it to be in the history books as the first ones to get Miss Bliss.
If this doesn't work, I got a great way to get her. Save it for next year, Screech. Watch the pros. You guys better hurry. Bliss just left Felding's office.
Going to great lengths to prank any teacher, even if it is Hayley Mills. Nope, not even close. Wrong audience. Disney handed it off, and the show reoriented itself around the students, and it was renamed Saved by the Bell. They eventually became Miss Blissless and did okay on their own. Now, about that same time, Canada sent us some quality television for teens in the form of the Degrassi franchise. It started in 1987 as Degrassi Junior High and quickly morphed into Degrassi High. Now, I have to believe that that may just have something to do with the fact that no American at any age wants to watch anything with the word junior high in the title. Once renamed, it embarked on all sorts of heavy teen topics and ultimately spawned a few more series that focus pretty realistically on teen life. In that first series, Degrassi High teacher Ms. Karen Avery was the focus of a few early plots, as they reveal her character to be a lesbian. Now, remember, this is 1987, and it was breakthrough stuff, courtesy of the Canadians. The character of Karen Avery didn't remain with the spin-offs, but Michelle Goodeve, the actress who played her, helped establish the show's street cred from the get-go. By the mid-90s and into the 2000s, you just have to think about it, there weren't as many women authority figures on shows centered around teens. And that's huge. I'm sure that there are just lots of theories about why that occurred, and I'd love to hear them from you if you've got some. Because you have Moesha, starring Brandy Norwood in the title role, and that was one of the many quality sitcoms that appeared on independent network UPN that featured almost exclusively African American casts. And in this case, Moesha is the daughter of a middle-class family. It's a stable home environment, and the incredibly smooth and divine Cheryl Lee Ralph, who's a veteran of both the big screen, Broadway, and TV, I guess that's a veteran of all of them, played Moesha's stepmother and the principal at her high school. But otherwise, it's kind of slim pickings. What do these high school teachers and administrators have in common? They appear in shows where young people are part of the ongoing plots. And the ensemble cast revolves around a family or a school. It makes total sense. Now, obviously, you also can factor in demographics of really where are the spikes in young people watching TV. And you can follow that across the generations from the baby boom, room 222, to the end of the baby boom, the very small Gen X, the millennials. So I'm sure that would be a fun overlay to put forth. But my personal favorite high school teacher is one with superhuman powers to not only defeat the forces of evil, but to engage with young people in a charming and effective manner. Of course, I'm talking about the Bionic Woman, Jamie Summers, played by the incomparable Lindsay Wagner. Now, here's some background about the show for those who are too young to know. It aired from 1976 to 1978 and was a spin-off from The $6 Million Man, which in and of itself was a huge breakthrough hit, starring hunk Lee Majors. Jamie Summers is the lead character. She is the Bionic Woman, and she had been a tennis pro turned teacher who was injured in a skydiving accident. And her hometown friend, Colonel Steve Austin, played by Lee Majors, who is the $6 Million Man, pleads the case for her survival to the government agency that installed his bionics after his accident. Thus, in her own show, Jamie is a government agent going undercover in all sorts of situations as a payback for her being rebuilt with bionic hearing, one bionic arm, and 2 legs. Yes, she was a retired world-class tennis player who appeared at Wimbledon, a nice tip of the hat to Billie Jean King and the strength of the women's tennis program in the late 70s. And yes, in her spare time, she taught classes on a military base in California. So once when Oscar Goldman, the director of OSI and the source of Jamie's spy assignments, asked her to go undercover to tutor the son of a foreign target, well, Jamie just couldn't, she wasn't comfortable with the hat they were asking her to put on.
Okay. Now, you want to tell me what I am doing in Monte Carlo dressed like Mary Poppins when everybody else is wearing postage stamps?
What are you talking about? You're perfectly well dressed for your position as a tutor for a crown prince. His name is Ishmael. He's the son of Ali Benghazi, Shah of Almain. It's the richest of the Persian Gulf oil countries.
Oscar, I don't like the idea of using my teaching or a child as a cover for a job. I mean, that's very personal, you know. In order to keep my head straight, I like to keep the OSI and my teaching very separate.
I respect what you're saying. Will you hear me out? The Shah is...
Seemingly, Jamie never learned that when the government needed her, her protests fell on deaf ears. There's excellent backstory to the amount of influence Lindsay Wagner, the actress, had on the plots and the approaches to keeping violence on this show to a minimum, but we can't get into that now. That's for another installment. So instead, Jamie met with Ishmael's father, the king of a Middle Eastern country which had recently gained great wealth from oil. Remember, this was the 70s. Jamie checked in with a little New Age, Earth Mother, Western pedagogy.
Now, what did you want to tell me about Ishmael's lessons?
Well, I think that breaking 2 boards for a boy his age is quite good.
Quite good is not sufficient. Ishmael is to be king one day. And for that reward, excellence is barely acceptable. His people have a right to expect nothing less. Do you disapprove of my teaching him to be a man?
Well, what I saw was more like destroying his ego than teaching him to be a man.
I would not expect a woman to understand. But in 30 years, Almain's oil will be depleted. 30 years to take a backward country into an industrial age. 30 years to do what it took your country 200 years to accomplish. And that's why I cannot afford the patience nor the luxury of understanding inefficiency. Now, as for Ishmael's lessons, they are to include mathematics, economics, philosophy, English, Russian, and geography. You still have a few hours this afternoon to get him started. We shall speak further later. You're excused.
Before we move on to the next clip, which has Jamie working one-on-one with Ishmael, you should know that Ishmael was played by after-school special teen heartthrob Lance Kerwin. There is no editing his really bad accent. And it does certainly beg the question of whether there was a teenage actor any closer to a Middle Eastern descent or appearance than blonde-haired, blue-eyed Kerwin. True to form, Jamie steers past bad acting and boorish men, even young men, to get the job done.
I think it would be nice if we got to know each other a bit before we started our lessons, huh?
There is nothing I want to learn from you. You are excused.
That's my line.
Woman, I need to learn things to make me strong and wise as my father.
You're very anxious to prove yourself to him, aren't you?
There. No woman could teach me that.
I'll make you a deal. You can break 2 boards. Your father can break 4. If I can break 6, then you will study for me. Now, if I can't, then I will leave you alone. All right?
Have you taken leave of your senses? No woman can break 6 boards.
Do we have an agreement?
Agreed. How did you do that?
That is your first lesson. Strength itself is not as important as how and when you apply it. Shall we start with geography? I thought we had an agreement. Or isn't the royal word worth anything?
Very well.
Your father taught you to respect strength, and to fear it. Well, there is a third way. You could try being friends with it and call me Jamie. It's a lot nicer than woman.
So really, folks, where would America be without its high school teachers, both women and men, and the incredible actresses who brought these characters to us, and the writers and the producers and the directors who recognize that quality imagery for young people is important, and it has a huge impact on how they walk out into the world as young adults. The great part about having so many high school teachers, women, featured in TV shows, spanning nearly these 50 years, is that it was indeed an occupation that helps us all better understand the culture at the time. Perhaps it isn't perfect, but it's all well preserved, ready for interpretation. Different approaches to addressing the universal drama of American teens and young people. From Liz McIntyre on Room 222 to Annalise Keating playing on our TVs today, it's just plain fascinating to see how writers empower these women to use their positions of respect, trust, knowledge, and life to change the world. Now, I'll be candid, folks. It's taken me 36 installments of this podcast to finally be able to squeeze in a serious tip of the hat to the Bionic Woman. Audio clips from this segment are mainly from videos posted on YouTube. The exception is the episode from The Bionic Woman entitled Jamie and the King, which aired on February 1977, and I pulled that from the show's DVD set. Regardless of your age, I'm guessing that if you like TV, you have some memories of TV shows that I've missed. So please send your thoughts, ideas, or memories of those teachers who influenced you when you were young to advancedtv herstory, that's all one word, @gmail.com. Do it in 140 characters on Twitter and find us at TV Herstory. This show and all podcasts live at the mercy of iTunes, so the nicest thing you could do would be to rate the show at iTunes or Libsyn, the hosting site, or post a few kind words of review, please. Stay tuned for a tour de force of those wonderful elementary school teachers. I've got 8 on my list. What about you? Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.